In another episode of clearing up misconceptions people have about certain characters, today we have Ei. I will be discussing the misconceptions people have about her as a character and then explaining her relationship with the Wanderer, which also has some misconceptions. Her past. Ei, unlike Zhongli and Venti, isn't the original Electro Archon. That title belongs to her sister Makoto. Ei was Makoto's weapon, so to speak. Makoto was in charge of Inazuma and Ei was her right-hand weapon. 500 years ago, Makoto died during the cataclysm in Khaenri'ah. As we know, Khaenri'ah was destroyed by Celestia because they dared to challenge the power of the gods while being mere humans. Seeing what happened to Khaenri'ah and also losing her sister and her friends to it, Ei made up her mind that the only way to protect Inazuma is to keep it from progressing. If she kept Inazuma from advancing as a nation, she would never have to suffer that loss again. She became obsessed with the idea of eternity and decided to build a puppet to lead Inazuma while she was in the plane of Euthymia. She made two successful puppets, the Wanderer and the Raiden Shogun. I will talk about the Wanderer later in the video. Now, after succeeding with making the Raiden Shogun, Ei retreated into the plane of Euthymia while the puppet carried out her duties. 1 year before our journey started, the Fatui made their way to Inazuma and started a plan to make a market for the delusions. Delusions are fake visions that give the wearer strength at the cost of their lives, like what happened to Tepe. In order to make a market for it, they made a deal with the Tenryou Commission to start the Vision Hunt decree. If they could incite a civil war in Inazuma, people will have more reasons to use the delusions, especially people who didn't have visions or had their visions stolen. They told the Raiden Shogun about it, and Ei approved of the Vision Hunt decree, because she believed that the ambitions brought by the visions could cause Inazuma to head in the same direction as Khaenri'ah, which is exactly what she was avoiding. By taking away people's visions, she could strip them of their ambitions and keep Inazuma safe. She knew of the Vision Hunt decree. What she didn't know was how badly it affected her people. The Fatui and the Tenryou Commission would give her false reports about what was happening in the city. If I am not mistaken, during the Archon quest, she wasn't even aware of the civil war happening, or rather she wasn't aware of the severity of it until we showed her. During her first story quest, we take her around Inazuma to show her all the changes that have made it since she hid herself away, all the good that has happened from the change that she was so afraid of. We showed her that change doesn't have to be bad. It is good to have change, and despite not many people liking her story quest, saying it felt like a date, which I don't really see, Traveler's just hanging out with her and showing her stuff. If you can't see two characters hanging out together without making some romantic inferences about it, that is mostly on you. It wasn't the most well-written Archon quest. Even among just story quests, it really wasn't the best, but it didn't feel like a date. That could just be me. It just felt like the Traveler was showing her all the good things that could come from change, and I think she had a good grasp on it by the end. During her second story quest, however, which was so much better plot-wise, I felt like it redeemed her character. Her second story quest really redeemed her character for a lot of people, because we see her acknowledge her actions and the consequences of it all. We also see her get punished for it by having to fight herself for 500 years, since it took her 500 years to see the error of her ways. Some people don't believe she deserves to be forgiven, and that whoever is afraid to keep a villain. My thing is, she was never really an actual villain. The Raiden Shogun, the puppet, was more of a villain than Ei herself ever was. Villain implies she was doing something bad, on purpose, which she wasn't. After seeing what happened to Khaenri'ah, she did everything she believed she could to keep her people safe. Now, how she went about doing it was wrong, but again, the intention is there. It doesn't justify it, but it explains it. Most of the people I've seen not liking her being forgiven tend to paint her as an evil, uncaring monster, which is just not true. After seeing how the Vision Hunt decree was harming her people, something she wasn't even aware of by the way, she changed her mind. She may still feel scared of change, but she realizes taking away people's ambitions is doing more harm than good, and that has to count for something. She was never really my favorite Archon, but upon learning more about her for this video, she is a lot more complex than people give her credit for. Other than painting her as good or bad, try seeing the bigger picture of her character, all she has gone through and how these mostly horrible experiences have shaped her as a character. Everything she did, good or bad, had a reason behind them. People should give her more benefit of the doubt rather than just painting her as either she's good because she didn't mean to hurt her people or she's bad because she did all of that knowing it could hurt her people. Characters tend to be more complex than people give them credit for, is what I'm trying to say. Now, let's talk about her relationship with Wanderer. Like I said previously, after her sister's death, Ei decided to create a puppet to rule over Inazuma, keeping it in the same state while she retreated into the plane of Euthymia to achieve eternity. There were two products of this. The first one was the Wanderer, known as Kunikuzushi at the time. When he was created, he wept in his dreams. He had feelings. Ei wanted an unrelenting soldier, which he was not. Upon seeing him like this, she decided not to use him, so she had no use for him. She wanted a soldier and he wasn't. Yamiko said to dispose of him, to kill him. Ei disagreed, saying he was a living being, he deserved to live. She decided to seal his powers away and let him take control of his own life. She then left him in the Shakyan pavilion and gave him a golden feather to protect him. The thing around his neck when he was a kid was given to him by Ei to keep him safe. To her, she did all that she could to give him a good life by not forcing him to be a soldier, which we know he ends up being regardless. But she couldn't have known all of that would have happened to him, couldn't have predicted that Dotore would have done that to him. and he doesn't know what she did for him. He, understandably, saw her leaving him not as her trying to protect him, but rather as her disposing of him after finding no use for him. His first betrayal, as he puts it. I'm not trying to justify Ei's action in any way, merely explaining everything she did and the intentions behind them. Their relationship is a case of misunderstandings. The Wanderer had every right to see what she did to him as betrayal, but Ei's side of the story should also be discussed instead of just villainizing her without knowing the full story or ignoring that part of the story. It's also kind of sad that the Wanderer erased himself from the world, so even if he wanted to go to her for an explanation, clear up the misunderstandings, she wouldn't remember him, so this misunderstanding can technically never be cleared. Although I do wonder what she would do if she saw the electro mark on his neck, the same mark she gave Radiant Shogun. The mark proves she created him after all, so I wonder how her reaction would be to see her mark on a puppet she technically doesn't remember creating. It would be an interesting plotline, but I also feel like it would be a plot hole in the story, so whoever's might not touch that part of the story because, it's kind of a plot hole. Now, let's get to the misconceptions part of the misconceptions video. The main misconception people have about her character is that she did all of this on purpose, and that is a bad ruler who didn't care about her people at all, which is just not true. I'm starting to see a pattern in how people treat Archons, especially both Zhongli and Venti also get villainized for what they've done, or in Venti's case, what he has not done. But in actuality, they do care about their people. Everything Ei did was to keep her people out of harm's way. She didn't do it to feel powerful over them. She didn't do it so they'd obey her every beck and call. She, like every other Archon so far, did it to keep them safe. Something that conveniently flies over people's heads, even when it's spelled out for them in-game. She didn't want Inazuma to end up like Kaneda, so during her moment of grief, she came up with a plan that, in hindsight, wasn't too good of a plan, but she was too busy grieving the loss of her sister, the loss of her friends, and having to fight off all the abyssal creatures that threatened to destroy Inazuma. Even after that, she had to fix all the damages done by the abyssal creatures. She was going through a lot and made a poor judgment call. You don't have to forgive her, obviously. You're entitled to not liking her if you want to, but at least understand the situation she was in. Because most people that I see that don't like her tend to just talk about her in a way that is technically wrong. Their idea of her is very misjudged by their hatred of her. Another misconception is people saying she didn't care about the Wanderer at all. She threw him away. She abandoned him, this is more understandable. If you look solely at what happened to the Wanderer, I can understand feeling like she didn't care. But like most things about Ei, you shouldn't take it as face value. She wanted a soldier. He wasn't. So instead of either forcing him to be one regardless, or as Ei Miko suggests, killing him, she set him free to decide for himself what he wanted to do with his life. She gave him a protective symbol and left him somewhere safe while he slept. To her, she did all she could at the time. She didn't want to be a mother. Probably doesn't even know how to be one. She was a weapon her entire life. So she did her best, but obviously her best wasn't enough, and the Wanderer ended up in a much worse situation. Rather than saying she didn't care about him, because she obviously did, it would be better to say her judgment call was wrong, and she could have done better, but she didn't. I do wonder if Hoya will ever touch their relationship again. It would be interesting to see her reaction to his electro mark, but that depends on if the Wanderer wants to see her again and if her knowing he exists would be considered a plot hole. Or if they do interact, Ei will never know that she made the Wanderer, which is kind of sad. Having your own mother not remember you ever again, especially when she didn't mean to hurt you, but you assume that she did. Oh, that is so sad. Anywho, in conclusion, Ei is a really complex character that has done some questionable things in the past, but she acknowledges it and is trying to make up for it. Her character suffers from the fandom for two main reasons. People who don't like her over-vilify her actions and ignore the reasons behind said actions. They don't try to understand why she did what she did, and even if they knew why she did what she did, they choose to ignore it. On the other hand, some of her fans try to cover up her crimes and act like what she did is okay, when even she herself admits it wasn't. I think people should strive to understand her actions and her reasons, but also know it doesn't justify it. It merely explains it, and she's on a path of bettering herself. You don't have to put a character into some category of good or bad. Some characters are more complex than little boxes of categorization, and I hope this video helped you see her as more than just good or bad. Learn to accept characters for their strengths and flaws, because that's what makes them interesting to learn about. What do you think about Ei as a character? Comment your thoughts down below, and if there is a misconception about her that I missed, feel free to comment that too. If you have a character that you think people get wrong all the time and you would like for me to talk about, then you may comment that too. That is all I have for today. I have made other misconception videos on other characters as well if you would like to check them out. Venti, Zhongli, Ayaka, and some other characters. Anyways, subscribe. See you whenever.